Now for a look at the situation from Japan and in the broader picture, what the shooting of Shinzo Abe could mean for the country, we're joined now by Jeffrey Kingston, professor of Asian Studies at Temple University, Japan. Professor Kingston, thanks so much for agreeing to talk about this developing story.
Yeah, it's just an awful shock.
It is. It is.
The nation is in grief. Officially, they're saying the former prime minister is in cardiac arrest, but that usually means the worst has happened.
Okay, well, could you talk a little bit more about that insight you're giving us into the language that's being used in terms of cardiac arrest, what that means in terms of whether he's succumbed to his injuries, perhaps?
It appears so, that they say he's had heart failure. So I think, he has died from his wounds.
Okay, right. No official word on that. If that's the case, Professor, when would the reports start to change, the language start to change?
I imagine either later tonight or early tomorrow. This is a lot for everybody to digest. I've been living here since 1987, and this is one of the most unbelievable, shocking events. You have to go back 30 years to the mayor of Nagasaki being shot by a gangster for his comments implicating the emperor in the outbreak of World War II. This doesn't happen at all in Japan. I was in the center of Shibuya, when this came down, and, you could tell the crowd, everybody was, feeling the grief and the pain. People were watching the news reports. Abe was a polarizing figure, but he was a political giant in Japan. He served as prime minister for 8 years, led the ruling LDP party back from the Abes, and he put his conservative stamp on Japanese politics. And he had fairly, strong support rates through much of his tenure. So I think that a lot of people evaluated his performance highly. But, you stay in power for 8 years, you're going to have your detractors. We don't know much about the attacker yet, and exactly what his motive was.
Right. I think you laid out his legacy pretty clearly there. And about the suspect, you say we don't know much. Without speculating too much, is there any word out there about affiliations or anything like that, possibly?
It's too early to speculate. You see things on Twitter, but I'd rather not, repeat those. He was with the, Maritime Self-Defense Forces. Abe was a strong advocate of revising Japan's pacifist constitution, and that was very controversial. He also was an advocate of revising Japan's shared history with Asia, which created troubled relations in the region. And, the Abe administration had a fair share of scandals, and many of his signature policies were not as popular as he was. The current Prime Minister Kishida was his foreign minister for many years. When he ran to become the president of the party last autumn, he and other candidates were quite negative about the legacy of Abenomics, and said it polarized society, created, exacerbated disparities, and didn't really have a lasting impact on growth. So, even within his own party, there are questions about the legacy. But on the day of his death, I think people are feeling grief and shock. This is something that you can't really imagine happening in Japan. I recall when John Kennedy was assassinated, and walking home from school, and you just saw everybody crying on the streets. There was this collective grief. You're not seeing something like that in Japan, but I think, people here are, more emotionally restrained, perhaps, than Americans, but I think people feel it deeply.
Well, grief in Japan ahead of elections this weekend that are crucial to the conservative party that Prime Minister Abe led. Could you speak to that, how this could impact the election?
Well, I think that the LDP was already expected to do quite well in the upper house elections, and this will probably generate a strong sympathy vote, so that Prime Minister Kishida's political position will be strengthened. And I think he honors the legacy of Abe. He is moving forward with Abe's desire to revise the Constitution and also boost military spending and strengthen Japan's international security alliances. So in a sense, you could say that Kishida will have a strengthened hand to move forward on that agenda in the coming year. And I think the upper house elections will go very well for the ruling party.
Well, shock and grief around the world, fair to say. Professor, thank you so much for sharing your time out of this very busy day and very sad day. Thank you.
Thank you.